know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
CJ, you've returned from Florida, and I bet you miss it.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Florida guy, if I'm being honest. Although
You're not a Florida man?
I appreciate the memes, though. The memes were great from my Florida trip. But it was obviously nice to get out in the sun, fun to be out with my TSN guys. But I wouldn't, like, Florida's not the kind of place I would vacation, put it that way. So I'm not too sad to be home. It's my dad's birthday today. So Coburg Papa, another year around the sun, and we got a cool day planned. He's going to come into Toronto. I'm taking him to the Leafs-Jets game tonight. Got a little dinner planned, and he's going to spend the night in Toronto. So that's so I guess maybe that's where my head's at when you ask, like, you're sad to be back. It's like, no, I'm pumped to be here because it's going to be a great day.
Happy birthday to Coburg Papa, an OG.
Loyal listener of the show. He has never missed a second.
I'd be beyond just loyal listener. I mean, I think he's everything to this show as far as I'm concerned. So we have to show him some love today on the CJ show. Coburg Papa, Mr. Johnston, happy birthday.
And let me set the record straight. I think this is my first time in the stand sort of as a quote unquote fan since that game in Calgary. And there will be no edibles tonight. There will be no edibles tonight for Coburg Papa and I.
Okay, I hope so. I mean, I don't know how your dad would take it if you're tripping out the whole time celebrating his birthday. That'd be a little weird. From the meetings, a lot of interesting stuff. I know we kind of touched off on stuff that could be discussed from earlier this week, but from what you remember from, in between being on the beach and all that, what were your biggest takeaways from the GM meetings in Florida?
One of the things that interested me, and it was just a tough one to dig into, is sort of the status of officiating. Obviously this is something that's been discussed a bunch around the league. We've had, a couple coaches fined for criticizing referees this year. The GMs were told at the meeting, at least as it was relayed to me by one of the GMs, they're basically instructed not to comment on it publicly. And so, it's hard to get a sense of where that's at, but because we're this close to the playoffs and the way this game goes, we've all been around long enough. There's going to be some controversy or multiple controversies around missed calls or what have you. And so, I was kind of curious about that. I get a feeling there's certainly some GMs that have concerns, but again, everyone's reticent to say too much, and it's going to cost you money in the pay books, so it may not be worth it. Might not change anything either. So I wish I had a better sense of how that discussion went behind closed doors. That's the tricky part. I think I mentioned this Monday, but you cover the meetings and you get to talk to the people in the meetings, but you're not physically in the meetings. So, a lot of it, there's the risk of broken telephone, I think, at an event like this. But, I think that's going to be a hot button topic, a bit of stuff on the World Cup, which we could get into, the stuff we teed up ahead of time. It's probably interesting in a sense. It's really minutia, but could have ramifications on how things work in future seasons. That the idea of the sort of how LTIR is handled, or a playoff salary cap, or we're going to frame that. The fact that it didn't die was notable. Certainly there's nothing in the works per se, but there was a discussion, I believe it was about 30 minutes on Tuesday. And, that's going to be picked up again when the GMs next meet at the Stanley Cup final. So that's kind of one that we'll be watching going forward. And as I say, could it potentially have a big impact on moves around the trade deadline in that, because it's really kind of a Nikita Kucherov, Patrick Kane, whatever's going on in Vegas type of rule. I'm not saying it's different. The thing is, it's hard to separate these things. And Vegas just has a whole bunch of guys injured and they have LTIR challenges. The Tampa situation was kind of specific, but anyway, I'll be curious to see where that goes. But it was a good few days. I did get the sense on sort of just a personal level that everyone really appreciated being back physically together the first time in 2 years of GMs. Obviously these guys all communicate a lot throughout the year on their phones, but there's a pretty good vibe around everything, and, couldn't complain about the weather. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I want to start with the World Cup because the biggest takeaway from that, yes, there could be one in 2024, but the fact that Team North America and Team Europe are dead. They were fun aspects of the last World Cup. Why would the NHL decide, you know what, we don't like fun when it comes to those two teams and we're scrapping them from the actual tournament? We're going to have just real countries. Like, why? Why would they do that?
Two obvious reasons to me. I think the long-term plan here is they want this to actually be a World Cup. They want this to be something that becomes a preeminent best-on-best hockey event in the world, much like we see with the World Cup of Soccer right now. Canada qualifies. Yay.
Yes, sir.
Remind everyone of that. And, so I think that to build it out long-term, you're going to have to establish some sort of play-in formula. And that's a lot of what's being talked about now. It sounds like there could be a play-in late 2023, in Europe. I don't know how many, I think the numbers and all that, some of that logistics is being worked out, but a couple of countries anyway would probably advance from the play-in into the event, with teams like Canada and the US automatically granted a spot there. And, so I think that that's one thing. Another thing is Team North America was awesome. In fact, for my money, the most memorable part of that tournament, and I covered every game there. I was there from start to finish. But it's not every year you could put together an under 23 Canada and US team that could compete with countries in best on best. I mean, you had a pretty special set of circumstances with, particularly Matthews and McDavid on the same team, but, Ekblad, Scheifele, Johnny Gaudreau. I mean, it was just a stacked team. And so I think that just because that was just sort of a special moment in time, that worked really well. But I think you'd be at risk potentially in future years. And I'm not saying in 2024, because I don't have my head around which prospects are where at that point, but I do think that there's a risk that team wouldn't be that competitive and therefore wouldn't be that interesting in future times. So, if you're going to build this right, which they really should be aiming to do, like there's a World Cup in 2004, then one in 2016. Now we're looking at 2024. I mean, you just can't establish any rhythm if it's not regular. And if there isn't, I think, some kind of play-in event, and you got to keep the countries engaged. And so, I think they're thinking a little bigger, and that's the main reasons. But, I'm not taking anything away from Team North America 2016 or even Team Europe who got to the final against Canada. I mean, that those teams did well, but they were really the reasons those teams came together too, Julian, at the time is the NHL was really crunched for time when it was planning that World Cup, and they didn't have time to actually roll out and conduct kind of a proper play-in event. And so they were by necessity at the time. It ended up probably working better than anyone thought, but it was totally a one-off experiment.
Okay, I have a question about the frequency of the World Cup. You bring up a really good point. Like over the last how many years, there's like so much distance in between at least the World Cups that I have seen in my lifetime. And while the Olympics are still around and players still want to play for the Olympics, why not have a situation where, a bit similar to what we see in soccer, where you have the World Cup and then every 2 years we have the Euros for European teams, for example, or like African Cup of Nations or the tournament in South America as well, or the Gold Cup in North America, where they're kind of offsetting in years that aren't with the World Cup or just around them. It could be a little bit blurred, but the idea I'm just trying to say is, why not have the Olympics? They have their time. And then in 2 years, you have the World Cup. And then 2 years again, you have the Olympics again. And then another 2 years, you have the World Cup. Like at least have it a bit more frequent so the World Cup is not out of sight, out of mind. I'm just throwing out an idea, but I'm with you on the idea that it needs to be a little bit more frequent.
Yeah, I think that is the hope, what you just laid out. And, the Olympics for all kinds of reasons have just not worked lately, but the players still want to go. It's still in the CBA. They're supposed to be in Italy in 2026. So already what we're talking about, I think when this World Cup gets finalized, there's going to be plans for 2024 and 2028. This will be in 2026. I mean, you start to see that pattern. And the beauty about that is a lot of this becomes narrative driven in a sense. I mean, part of best on best, it captures your attention for a short amount of time. It's kind of a measure in that moment, who's the best, or sometimes obviously luck or good fortune plays into what happens. But, in 2024, someone might have their hearts broken as a country. It might be Canada. Canada's had a good long run in men's hockey, best on best of winning events. Maybe Canada loses 2024, and then just think of the hype that goes into the 2026 Olympics if Canada were to lose it. Maybe they don't win there. That's and that plays out in each of the, especially the top hockey countries where there's hope for to win gold or to win the tournament. And so I think that is the ideal scenario. I think it makes sense. When they did that 2012-13 CBA, it's amazing how time flies. I mean, we're talking almost a decade ago. There was actually a section added to that CBA about growing international hockey. I think to some degree, the NHL has done that. because, it has held regular season games in Europe, pre-COVID times, and has plans to do so again next season. I think they have expanded their footprint there, but like if you're looking at ways the sport could grow, I think the NHL has to bring its brand even more to those places where people love hockey naturally. And so all this feeds into that, in my opinion. I think the Olympics don't necessarily put money directly into the NHL's pockets, but I find it hard, sort of disingenuous to argue that it's bad for the fundamentals of the hockey. It just could be bad for individual owners, say if their best player gets injured over there and it costs them playoff dates. I mean, that's the balance. But I mean, fundamentally, when you have 5 million people in a country watch one game of your sport, I mean, that's got to help with having interest in that sport continue and kids enter it. Anyway, I'm way down the rabbit hole here. But the point is that, yes, it's got to be regular. It's a shame, and that the best players, that Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews and the like, their generation, have never played for their countries in best on best at the men's level. They did at the World Juniors and all that. But I think it's just about time. The NHL recognizes that. And, I really think we're going to see a regular series of events here, starting with that February 2024 World Cup.
Yeah, that would be ideal to see. If that's what it takes for us to see Connor McDavid play at the senior men's national level for Team Canada, at this point, I think we're just going to have to take it at this point.
We want to see him play with Sidney Crosby too, right?
Yes.
That's the whole point. Like, one of the shame things, like I never 100% confirm this, but I think there was a world where those guys might have played on the same line in Beijing if it had been NHL best on best. I think that there was at least a willingness on Crosby's end to play the wing if that's what the coaching staff wanted. And, I don't know if it would have lasted. Team Canada's lines always get switched around in these tournaments, but it just would have been cool to see those guys on the same line. It's just, there's something sort of symbolic about it. I actually remember when I was working at Sportsnet, they sent me down to Pittsburgh when Connor McDavid played his first game head-to-head against Crosby. And it was really cool, like how much it clearly meant to him. Like, it wasn't like a media created thing. It clearly was a big deal for him, and he had a great game. And it was just, there's something special about sort of torches being passed in that way. And so, even if you're American, you're thinking of Austin Matthews with Patrick Kane, and Kane is one of Austin Matthews' really influences. When he was a kid, he would watch all his highlights. And so I just think all that stuff, like, that's part of the cool thing that happens in these sort of events. And so you need to have them frequently, again, because the lifespan of an NHL career is just not that long.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, for fans just wanting to see those players come together, at the end of the day, we have to think of them too. And the possibility of seeing some of the best players we've seen just come together on these international teams. I get it. If it's going to be a bit more frequent, I'm all for having the World Cup, even if it means we don't get Team North America or Team Europe. I know we kind of jumped into World Cup talk, and you kind of touched off on the salary cap LTIR stuff. I hope we didn't miss anything in the preamble on that. Just, you did mention that they did kind of discuss it for about 30 minutes at the GM meetings. Like, I've already kind of made my position clear. Like, I'm not crazy about the idea of trying to add that for the playoffs or anything like that. But the fact that that it got to a point where it was brought up before and then discussed again at the meetings, like, it is really interesting to me.
Well, and here's the deal. I don't think it's that big of an issue personally. I think I've laid this out, but there's not that many teams that are really able to use it. And like, the circumstances really have to line up for it to be viewed as a true tool that you can game. But, the other thing too, is I have a reasonable understanding of the collective bargaining agreement, at least for someone who does my job, because it's not my job to operate under it. But LTIR, like, the way it works, is one of the most confusing. It's probably the most confusing aspect of the whole CBA. It's highly nuanced. I know multiple people that are that run the cap for NHL teams that struggle to wrap their minds around it, or that need to call central registry when they're operating in it for advice, or just, and so I'm only laying out that piece of context to say maybe there's some small tweak to a system I don't truly understand that makes this all better. And so go away and explore that and tell us about it. And hopefully we can relay it to the public, because it really is highly technical in the way all this stuff works. But, I just don't think that many teams are truly gaining this huge advantage from it, personally. And even when you talk about the Golden Knights, like, there's a lot of questions about them specifically at this meeting the point I kept making is if they can't activate Mark Stone, if he becomes healthy, like that's a penalty to them anyway, because they're in a playoff race. Now, the counter would be like a team like Tampa was in no danger really of missing the playoffs, so they had no reason to activate Kucherov. But, I'm just saying there's a dangerous line teams are walking. And really there's only 5 or 6 or 8 teams, even when you get this late into the season, that are sure things for the playoffs. Like there's a number of teams right now that are in, but if they lost 5 games in a row, would be on the wrong side of the line. And so, you don't want to take too much for granted. And so I just think it's so few teams truly benefit from this. I get why the attention it got when Kucherov did it. I mean, Dougie Hamilton came out after Carolina lost to Tampa and, mentioned losing to a $90 million payroll or something to that effect. I mean, I get why players, I guess, don't like it, but I'm not sure that there's a way to make this perfect in the way that everyone will feel satisfied.
The next point I wanted to bring up, and this is one of the rare times I have to admit I had a whole setup plan for the next thing I want to bring up, and my mind just completely blanked for a second. This is so embarrassing. It finally took 50 something episodes. Coffee.
We'll just have a man. We'll rediscover our flow.
Okay, there we go. I got it. The thing I wanted to ask about was the discussion of no trade clauses. Obviously, we discussed in depth about Evgeny Dadonov and what happened to him with the Vegas Golden Knights. Was that touched on at all in Florida?
Yeah, they're going to make a change there. The NHL and the NHLPA are already discussing it. And it sounds like essentially how it'll work is, when players or their agents send in the no trade clause to the team, that's the NHL Central Registry, and the NHLPA will also be CC'd on that. It will be placed into some sort of database. And I think it's really just an extra layer of, something can't go wrong, something can't be missed element to it. And that makes sense. I mean, I didn't get the feeling that one was controversial. I think everyone understood that was just a situation that a league can't have happen. It's not fair to the player. It's not really fair to I don't know who's wrong here. So I don't want to, but it's probably, if the Golden Knights didn't know that there was a no trade clause there, it's not really fair to them that that's the trade they tried to make to relieve their cap situation. It didn't happen. But I don't want to wade too far into that because I really am not 100% sure where the breakdown happened there. But Central Registry didn't know there was a trade list, obviously, or they wouldn't approve the trade. So, I think that this makes sense. And there's some danger, I guess, that now there won't be any secrets or whatever, that some of these trade lists will get out there. But, I think by and large, this is just a logical fix to try to safeguard the system from something like this going down again.
Thank you for cleaning that up. I don't know what happened in my brain in that last minute where I was just like, oh man, there's the whole setup of this next topic I wanted to bring up. And just for whatever reason, I blanked for a second. It happens to the best of us, CJ.
Dude, it's a long season, so you just got to manage your energy. It's all good.
Absolutely. Was there anything else from the meetings that you want to bring up that I missed?
Not really. Nothing that jumps out. I mean, there was obviously other things discussed there, but some of them weren't that meaty for our purposes. There's some small tweaks being considered. The coach's challenge, for example, this will become relevant in the playoffs. We might see something like this come up in the playoffs. As it goes right now, if a major penalty is assessed, the referee has a chance to review that penalty in the penalty box and reverse his call to a 2-minute penalty, minor penalty, but he can't take it to nothing. He can't rule he just was wrong. So it was discussed maybe giving referees, this wouldn't be if it ever came to be, it's got to go through the competition committee and wouldn't come in until next season. But they're thinking of expanding, I guess, the things referees can review and what they can do. And that makes sense because just let's lay this out, a hypothetical. Referee assesses a major in Game 7 of a Cup final game and goes to the penalty box, uses that review tool, realizes it shouldn't be a penalty at all, but he has to give it at least a 2. That doesn't really make sense because the team still gets a power play and potentially a pivotal game. And so I think that's something that could come out of it. But again, a lot of those are really highly nuanced parts of the rule book that get looked at. And there wasn't too much else. I mean, I know we'll talk about Eugene Melnyk later, but that was an interesting, it's a sad moment, but that news came down when I was in an area with, maybe 8 or 10 of the GMs, but sort of in the same general area, and seeing that get processed by everyone was unique, different. But it was a good couple days, and it honestly did feel like another step towards normal, which, as you know, is a regular on this podcast, Julian. You understand that's what I'm all about.
That's very true. And yes, we will get to discussion about Eugene Melnyk just before we get to stick taps. But before we do that, I wanted to, I had some time last night and I just started looking around at, the goals list leaders, who's leading that, and assists and all that. And it seems as if we have ourselves a tie right now atop the goals list between one Leon Draisaitl and Austin Matthews, who you and your pops will get to see later tonight. There's a chance Coburg Papa, for his birthday, gets to see Austin Matthews score goal number 50. That sounds like an exciting ordeal.
Actually, let me get the exact text I got from him, because I don't want to misquote my own dad on my own podcast.
I get that. I can't wait to see it as you
Tuesday night.
Yes.
Tuesday night, 8:41 p.m. Wow, Leafs unbelievable. I'm okay if Austin waits till Thursday for number 50.
Oh.
He had already circled. He'd already circled that he could get a birthday gift and seeing a milestone goal. I mean, not many people in Leafs history have scored 50. There's a list of 3. Dave Andreychuk did it twice. I think Rick Vaive might have done it 3 times, but he definitely did it multiple times. And Gary Leeman. But it's been a long time since a Leafs player has done it. Obviously, Matthews would have actually done it each of the last 2 seasons if they were full seasons and not wiped out by COVID. But that'll be cool. Whether he does it tonight or not, it's going to be maybe a little birthday present there for Coburg Poppy if Poppy pops one.
Yeah. You see, I heard the Poppy. I had used Coburg Poppy like earlier in our show.
You see what I was doing there? I just got the tongue twisted,
Yeah, you got Poppy, Papa, and you're like, Pops. I get it. I understand. But like the fact that both Draisaitl and Matthews tied at 49, I believe Draisaitl was asked about, and he's like, yeah, of course I want to find a way to beat Austin Matthews for that goal total. But like, that's pretty cool to see 2 of the best go at it, and just basically dueling, not just to get to 51st, but also who's going to end up getting more goals. I still think Austin can still crack 60 before season's end, but
I think they're both cracking 60, man, because they're both want to beat the other, right? Like it's going to be a sprint to the finish. Austin, as we're recording this, has 16 games left. Leon Draisaitl has 14 games left. I mean, 11 goals in 16 games is child's play for Austin Matthews, what we've seen. And 11 and 14 for Leon is like right in his wheelhouse. I mean, he's scored just a boatload of goals the last few seasons. So I actually think they both get to 60. I'm not making any predictions who wins. I mean, I guess you just give Austin the edge because he's got 2 more games to play. But I think it'll be interesting to watch. Probably more interesting than what the Art Ross is going to be. Like, I just expect McDavid to just win it by accident, because that seems to be what he does every year. I don't think he needs to try any harder to go for points. Like, he just doing what he does. He's already reestablished a bit of a lead here. It's only 3 points on Draisaitl as we're recording, but 3 points to get on your teammate is a lot, because they're in on each other's goals so often. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun race to the finish. I mean, we've even got Roman Josi, right? He's got a chance at 100 points as a defenseman. So there's a few milestones to see. 60 goals might be the biggest of them all, though. And it's cool that there's at least 2 guys that look to have a chance. Maybe, who knows? Maybe one of those players just behind him, Chris Kreider, or someone gets hot and makes a run at it. It's not impossible. But it's been a decade since someone scored 60 goals in the NHL, and there's only been a handful of guys who've done it in the last 30 years. So that's a pretty special mark that those guys are now within reach of.
I know you like Manscaped for your balls, but this news is actually not for your balls, but it has everything to do with Manscaped. They are launching their Ultra Premium Collection, and it is not for your private parts. We're talking about a leveled up hygiene routine with your favorite manly scent. It is an all-in-one skin and hair care kit for the everyday man, and it covers you from head to toe. Literally, Manscaped is trusted below the waist. Now trust them with the rest. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping. All you have to do is just insert the code Chris21. I mean, it's Chris Johnston's name and the number 21. By the way, the package, we've got Manscaped Premium Deodorant. Again, not for your balls. It's really just for your armpits. The deodorant dries clear, is aluminum free, and smells like their signature scent. Hydrating body spray, body wash, 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner, And you get a free gift, a 3-pack set of lip balm that is made up of ingredients like vitamin E, peppermint, and eucalyptus oil to keep those chappers feeling moist. I lose lip balms all the time. A 3-pack of lip balm would be great for me. That's 4 products plus a free gift in the Ultra Premium Collection. All of these products are also cruelty-free, paraben-free, vegan-friendly, and dye-free. The best ingredients with zero compromise. 20% off plus free shipping with the code Chris21 at manscaped.com. 20% off plus free shipping with the code Chris21 at manscaped.com. The power of attraction is now in a bottle and a few other fun products, thanks to Manscaped. If you're the type of person who's always thinking about new business ideas or wondering what's the next side hustle I should spin up, you should check out the podcast My First Million. The hosts Sean Puri and Sam Parr have each built 8-figure businesses and sold them to Amazon and HubSpot. And each week, they brainstorm business ideas that you can start tomorrow. These can be side hustles that can make you a few grand a month, a big billion-dollar idea, or anything in between. So be sure to check out My First Million on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Connor McDavid, by the way, reaching the 100-point tally, the 4th time in his career he's done so. Yeah, he's probably going to be the runaway winner of the Art Ross Trophy, barring some late season catch-up here. You mentioned Roman Josi. Like, you know what? I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was in a meeting with like a couple coworkers, and we were talking about Roman Josi, and I did not realize he had as many points as he had. I did not realize he was on this torrid of a pace throughout the year. Like, it's
if
crazy.
You look at his last month, he went bananas. Like he was having a great season, but the last month has been like video game stuff. So that's why you probably didn't realize, because it's pretty recent that he's bolted this quickly, this fast.
Yeah, because we hyped up Cale Makar. At one point, people were wondering if Cale Makar was going to get like 40 goals in a season. He's in his like 20s in terms of goals right now, but like Roman Josi is flirting with a 100-point season. He might come a little short of that with the amount of games he might have left, but that's still a remarkable point. And I get with the Norris, it's not necessarily about goals and assists for that position, but I mean, there's no question Roman Josi has put himself firmly in that discussion for the Norris Trophy this season.
Yeah, to me, it's got to be Makar, Hedman, or Josi that wins it. I mean, that's just my view of it. I guess something could change in the next month. There's still a bit of time here, but that to me seems to be your list of finalists, and then it's what order you want to write them down in when you get your ballot. Pretty heady stuff. I mean, the cool thing that underlies this whole discussion, frankly, is that this season right now is the NHL's best in terms of goals production since 95-96.
Yes.
In terms of goals per game. So that's, I mean, one begets the other, right? We're talking about the top players in the league chasing these special milestones. Well, part of the reason of that is because there's more goals being scored, and those are the players that account for points or goals on those goals. So, I think it's exciting. I think it's good for the league. I don't totally know why it's happened, because if you look at power plays, like it doesn't appear to be all driven by power play percentage. I would think, and I really haven't dug into this, I should probably be digging into it rather than just like speculating wildly, but let's go ahead anyway. I would think that we see more empty net goals these days because teams more frequently are pulling goaltenders early. Sometimes you see multiples in a game that then was sort of common practice in the 90s, say. But there's also been an influx of skilled players in the league, and that's got to be playing a role too. So I think it's great for the league. Whatever it is, I hope they can isolate it and continue it. We've seen some wacky scores lately. What was it? 11-2, the Pittsburgh-Detroit game?
Yeah, like Detroit.
It's that 10-7 game involving Detroit a month ago. Like, I love it.
Dmitry Filipovich a couple of days ago put up a tweet saying that the Red Wings have had games where they've allowed 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 goals allowed. Like, that's zany. The other night I was watching a Florida Panthers Canadiens game that ended 7-4 in favor of the Florida Panthers. And
that's normal now.
Yeah.
That's not like as crazy. Like 2 years ago, you'd be like 7-4. We'd be talking about it for weeks. But like now that just passes by your score line because you see that's like sort of wild scores now. I think it's great, honestly. I've enjoyed hockey this year. Like I'm especially like sort of once we got through all the COVID stuff, like the disruptions, and you never knew which team was playing when and what was going on. I think we're going to have a great run into the playoffs, and I think the first round is going to be nuts. We're going to have to do a pod every day or something. I'm kidding. There's just going to be so much to react to. I'm just saying, if 3 days go between pods, it'll be like, wow.
Yeah, that's true. We had like an emergency trade deadline podcast, and we're gonna have to do that for. I thought about this, right? And this is us again doing one of those like in podcast meetings here. Like, I mean, are you going to be on like Leafs playoff coverage? Like, how's that going to work for you this year?
I honestly don't know. Yeah, I don't have any inclination what it'll be. But I mean, whether I'm on location all over the place, I have been the last 12 or 15 years of my career, or if I'm based at home a little bit more, I'm still going to be watching all the action. So, I mean, either way, in some ways, if I don't end up going and covering like one series intensively, you can better keep a handle on what's happening elsewhere, because when you're immersed in it every day, there's just not a ton of time. Sometimes games are on in the afternoon when you're at practices or what have you. So I don't really know, but we're going to find a way, and it's going to be fun. Honestly, I think our playoff pods, we're going to have to up our game a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Did you hear about the SDPN announcement, by the way, about the Game Over shows? They're expanding.
No.
Yes. If you go on sdpn.ca/careers right now, they are taking applicants for people to host shows of Game Over, just like Andrew Berkshire does in Montreal, for a couple of markets out in Calgary. I believe Edmonton is one. I believe Toronto is one as well. I think they're looking at Winnipeg and possibly Vancouver as well. Yeah, the Game Over is expanding. The announcement came Tuesday night, actually. So, hey, I mean, we might not even have to necessarily do like a whole like every night thing, because there may be podcasts on this network that might do it for us.
Ah, there you go. I love that.
Yeah, I love that idea too, personally. But I also love the idea of us just like trying to react to everything as much as we can during the postseason, which I'm with you. I'm anticipating a lot of competition and a lot of great teams in the playoffs. I was reading an article from Dom Luszczyszyn before we got on today, and he had maybe I'm not explaining it properly here, but one of his models that he has, like, they try to rank like contending teams, and normally it's around between 2 or 4 that are like really good. There's like up to like maybe 6, 7, or 8, because you're thinking maybe a Colorado, a Florida. You have to put Toronto in there. You put Tampa Bay in there. You put Carolina. You put Pittsburgh in there. I think I mentioned Boston, but Boston might have a chance at it too. Like, there are so many teams this year. Minnesota, who I want to get to a little later on, as they're doing really well. There are so many teams right now who are so good, who have a legitimate chance at Lord Stanley's mug at the end of near the end of the summer. Like, it's insane.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Dude, it's funny. I was just thinking, I wish producer Nick had his camera on when I said we're going to do a pod every day. Like, he'd be like, oh, that's just so much Chris and Julian like in his ear, because he's got to listen in real time and then listen again. So yeah, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's okay. Also, I should say beginning of the summer for the Stanley Cup, not the end of the summer, but you get what I mean.
This is a GM's note. It sounds like next year they're going to be back on normal schedule.
Oh, okay. So
like no entry draft in July, as we're going to be in Montreal early July, no free agency in mid-July, back to probably July 1st free agency, and then back, the cup gets handed out by mid-June, all that stuff. So I think they're hoping to be recalibrated for 2022-23. Fingers crossed.
I mean, already just being in Montreal for the summer, there's stuff happening all the time. It just hit me that the NHL draft is going to be like smack near the end of Jazz Fest. I don't know if you've ever been in Montreal for Jazz Fest.
I have.
Oh man, so already the city's going to be lit. And I know with COVID and all that, but I'm pretty confident by that point things should be okay. But yeah, it's going to be quite a time in Montreal in July. And hey, maybe things will happen. And maybe I'm saying too much already.
We're having a show there. Adam, get on it.
Boom. Just put it out there for everybody. Enough is enough.
Wow, we got to manifest here. Like, come on. We're coming to
I wasn't trying to
events on the calendar. We need a presence there.
I wasn't trying to spoil anything, Siege. I was trying to tease people with that. You just were just like, screw it. Like we're doing a show there. I'm trying to tease it.
Oh,
It's okay.
so no, I don't know if like no one told me we're doing a show there 100%, but I just think I think our audience would show up for a show in Montreal.
Absolutely, they will.
On July 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th, whatever date it ends up working with around the draft event. Like, come on, our people will show.
Oh, absolutely. Let us know in the comments section, by the way, if you are in Montreal, or if you would just make the trip to
spamming
Montreal.
Adam Wild, please, on Twitter. Just at Adam
Yes.
Wild, and just let them know that you want a live SDPN show, including CJ and Julian in Montreal in July.
And I also want a Coburg show too. I still want that damn show.
That's going to be season 2. I think we didn't we lost the momentum, but I think like next fall, next winter, that's happening.
Okay. Let's find a way to make that work, because I gotta see the city where CJ came up from. Anyway, Minnesota. The
you
Minnesota
don't need much time. You won't need much time.
Just like one. That's
Set
fine.
aside an hour, and I'll show you all the sites.
All right, fine. I want to talk about the Minnesota Wild really briefly, because they are the NHL's hottest team right now. A 7-game win streak. Flower power, Marc-Andre Fleury has only allowed 3 goals in the 2 games he's played with the Minnesota Wild so far. They've beaten Boston, Chicago, Vegas, Vancouver, Columbus, Colorado, and Philly to get to that 7-game win streak. Tonight, they play the Pittsburgh Penguins to see if they could extend it to 8. They're pretty comfortable in the Central Division where they're at right now. I believe they're in second in their division. Any thoughts on the win streak? Any thoughts on the Minnesota Wild? We all know, like with the salary cap problems that are coming for them later on, this is a make it or break it year for them this year.
Maybe make it or break it to a point. I mean, they still have good young players. A question mark though, like Kevin Fiala, and I don't have his numbers up, but he's been point a game for 30 or 40 games, something along that line. He's been awesome for them. Can they afford to keep someone like him when those salary cap crunches come through? Because we know they're either keeping Kirill Kaprizov and some others. And so those will be decisions that Bill Guerin will have to navigate come this summer, but enjoy the ride right now. I think the Wild have been, between last season and this season, is 2 of their most entertaining seasons that they've had in their existence, because of course they were born under Jacques Lemaire once upon a time and just played a certain style. And it was a different era of the NHL too, but they played a lot of 2-1 games in their history before getting to now. And I just think that they're an exciting team. What's interesting about the Fleury acquisition is that Cam Talbot, his battery mate now in net, has been red hot, even before the trade went through, but since as well. And so they've got 2 decent or even above average options there, which is helpful. And they've got a skilled deep team. I mean, I think we're all looking at sort of Calgary, Colorado as the 2 teams to really fear in the West. We'll see. Maybe can Vegas get back in our conversation? I don't know if it's possible, just given the injuries and all that. But I think at a fully healthy, fully clicking Golden Knights team would be pretty daunting as well. I just don't know if we're going to get a chance to see that before the end of this season. But Minnesota's got to they're going to have to upset one of those powers at some point if they're going to have a long playoff run. But I'm not ruling out that they could do it. Other than the fact we're backing the Panthers publicly for their All-Star game bet, I'm not saying anything's for certain this year. It feels like a wide open class. I know there's a few teams that are really good. Like Colorado is going to be tough to beat. But is it impossible that someone else takes a chunk out of them? I don't think so. I don't think anyone, there's not a lot of certainty in this sport to begin with, but there's even less certainty this season.
You mentioned Calgary. I didn't mention them initially when I was listing off all those contending teams. They should definitely be in that camp. That's a team that has had some really good games against the Colorado Avalanche this year. So I don't want to.
He had his second quote about not wanting to play Colorado because you're just going to get your ass kicked, and that doesn't much interest me. His second quote along those lines, like, it's very clear Calgary wants to win its division, not to hang a division banner, but to basically, it's that if you win your division, you guarantee you can't play Colorado until at least the Western Conference final. So it's clear to me that he's just openly admitting they don't want any scenario where they drop back here and have to face him any sooner than that.
Yeah. A collision course with those 2 teams in the West would be must-watch television without a doubt. Like, if we're talking about
Battle of Alberta, please.
I want it. I think that'd be perfect. I would watch that. I mean, there's no question we would watch it. It would be incredible. Calgary would win that series, though. And I felt that way earlier in the year. And now I feel even more confident that they would win a series over the Edmonton Oilers, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to make me choose one or the other and my life was on the line, I would say Calgary, but hockey's crazy, man. And Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, who knows? But you're right. I think Calgary is a legitimate cup contender. Like I have them in my top tier of teams, actually. It wouldn't surprise me to see them go on that kind of run. I think they have the goaltending. I think they play a style that predicts success. Their top players have been unreal this year. Like scroll through the NHL scoring leaders. You've got Goodrow up there. You've got Matthew Tkachuk right near the top. Even Elias Lindholm. You don't have to scroll down too far before you're finding his name. I mean, they've got a deep team. I think the Toffoli addition was smart. Maybe they'll have question marks about their blue line, maybe, but I don't see it as a huge issue because I think as a team they play so sound defensively that they're built to have a long playoff run.
Yeah. It's a bit of a hard transition from talking about the excitement of the rest of the NHL season into the postseason. I know we talked about Minnesota and how some of these cup contending teams are. However, there was some sad news that did take place earlier this week with the owner of the Ottawa Senators, Eugene Melnyk, passing away after a long illness. It's a bit of an interesting story, or at least an interesting way we've kind of commemorated him in the last few days, in the fact that, yes, he was the owner of the Ottawa Senators and did everything he could to keep the team in there, but because of the fact that he had that history of basically alienating fans and media and even players, it's made his legacy a bit complicated. I know Ian Mendez, and I've been picking this up pretty much on almost every podcast I've been on. He wrote a really good article for The Athletic.
It was excellent.
Basically, it was excellent. It detailed how complicated that legacy was. He found a way to balance himself on the tightrope of making Eugene a human while also detailing some not so good stuff. What do you think of the way we've been remembering Eugene Melnyk over the last few days since his passing?
Well, first, just one more thought on the Ian Mendez's piece in The Athletic is that's an example of when someone has covered someone their entire life, essentially, or like he was there in Ottawa for all of Eugene Melnyk's tenure. And so he's had those personal interactions, which made that story really pop, but he also has a true sort of clear view of everything that went on. And it's a reminder, honestly, things really aren't black and white too often in life. Like someone might brand him like a terrible owner because he was responsible for Daniel Alfredsson, twice exiting the organization. And you might be a diehard Senators fan who loved Daniel Alfredsson. And, you might not like what he said in the media at the time that we went there for that outdoor game and he mused to the reporters about moving the team out of town. But then you zoom out and you're like, first of all, he bought this team when it was headed for bankruptcy. He kept it in Ottawa. That was in 2003. He kept it in Ottawa these last 19 years. He did try to get a downtown arena built, which would have, I think, ensured the team's safety or the fact they'd stay there for at least another 20 years or more. And we'll see. There's still talk that downtown project could be. It's not completely dead on the vine yet. So, I think if it depends what you want to pick out of the story, right? I think high level, he was highly colorful, often controversial. Did some things that were open to criticism, but he also kept the team there. He cared about the team. I think he cared about the city and trying to keep that organization going. I mean, he didn't just sell it to someone who was going to move it elsewhere when there were times I think he could. I mean, he had to refinance the team twice, I believe, at least that they announced publicly. And so, it was a bit of a struggle for him at times to keep the thing afloat financially, but he remained steadfast to Ottawa. And, I should just say on a personal level, just 62 is way too young to die. It's a sad story on that front. He had a health scare a few years ago and got a liver transplant, but, he's left behind young kids, 2 young daughters who are in their 20s. And essentially we'll have to find out if they want to continue to own this team. Do they want to sell it? It's really not clear where things go from here in terms of his estate and what the succession plan might be. But, I think in a lot of ways, I think he was good for the sport in a lot of ways. It's just, I think you would have appreciated maybe more stability as a Senators fan through some of those years. And obviously maybe some of the personal things that went down with, a legend like Alfredsson and a few others. But, anyone who's going to run anything in the public eye for 20 years is probably going to have a few marks against them on the scorecard, just because it's a difficult thing to do.
I think that's really well said, CJ, with regards to Eugene Melnick, and way to add to answer another question I had with regards to, what's going to happen with the ownership of this team. You're right. It does seem a little bit up in the air with that. I did have questions about that.
Well, and I have to presume there was some sort of plan laid out, just because Eugene, was very ill when he got his liver transplant 5 or so years ago. And so, when someone has the amount of money or assets that he has, and it has a serious health scare, I would have to believe that this plan is laid out in his will, or, it's been communicated to the NHL. It's just that hasn't been shared publicly. And I don't think it'd be very responsible for me to speculate on what it might look like. Gary Bettman did mention Tuesday at the GM's meeting that he's been in touch with the executor of the estate. And so, there will be a process there. And I think it will become more clear over time, whether it's, it could be sold at auction. It could be his daughters run the team. It really could be a number of things. Maybe he's left it to somebody else in trust or something. I just don't know what's in his will. And, it's hard to know. But I would guess with reasonable certainty, the NHL has known about what the plan would be for some time, just because, he's been in declining health for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. On the subject of the Ottawa Senators, did you catch whiff of the report from La Presse about the idea that about 5 games from the Ottawa Senators, I think maybe next year, could be played in Quebec City? Any quick thoughts on that?
I think it's an interesting idea. I understand why, if you're a Senators fan, you might bristle at it. But let's face it, if Quebec City doesn't have a team, it's a chance to at least bring NHL hockey to their building. Probably selling out all those 5 games, I'm guessing. I guess it might depend on the opponents and the timeline and all that stuff, but it could be a revenue maker. It could be a chance for Quebec even to show that it can step up and really support NHL hockey. I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. To me, 5 games it's not a material amount. I'm just saying, if you're a fan, you still get 36 home games in your own market. So it's not, I didn't necessarily see that move as one that is a sign the Senators are moving to Quebec City, as much as I think it's just a chance to try to make more money, because they do have trouble selling out their own arena. And that was the case even before the pandemic. That's not just a pandemic related turn of events. So, I think it's interesting. My understanding is it was really preliminary talks, and actually it sounds like with Eugene's passing, actually, that it's less likely to happen, ironically. The stories come out after his death, but I think the talks really were held before his death, and it was something he was sort of pursuing. And so now that the team is in a little bit of an uncertain period in terms of who's running it, I think it's actually less likely to happen than it was before he died.
And with that, we should express our deepest condolences to the Melnick family in light of Eugene's passing. Let's make sure we have that there with regards to that with Eugene Melnick. Another thing I want to bring up just before we get to stick taps, a bit of an unfortunate injury to Clayton Keller of the Arizona Coyotes suffered on Wednesday night. Just kind of awkwardly fell into the boards in a game, I believe, against San Jose. I just came across a tweet, I believe, that came from Clayton Keller here. He just sent this earlier Thursday morning. Want to thank my teammates, the fans, and medical personnel for the love and support last night. Unfortunately, the season's over for me, but I'm resting comfortably at the hospital in good spirits. I will be back better than ever for day 1 next season. That's at least good to hear. We got carted off. He put up the 2 thumbs up just to let everyone know he was okay. But yeah, it was a bit of a gruesome injury just to see, but it's just good to see that Clayton Keller is okay.
It is. Another reminder why social media isn't all bad. Something like that, before you even have too much time to worry about it as a fan or someone who just watched that, you're getting right from his mouth or his fingers, where he's at and what he's thinking. It's great. That's
good. And with that, let's get to stick taps. That's the thing we do every Thursday, where we just show some love to somebody, whether in the hockey community or outside of that. I'll start, CJ. I'll shout out Ben Stelter, the 5-year-old battling glioblastoma, who the Edmonton Oilers invited as a very special guest a couple of games ago, and basically just gave him everything. They let him hang around the locker room. They had him on the ice. He got to hang around, obviously, the best players with the Edmonton Oilers. That was a really cool story to see, and that's one of the more heartwarming ones you can see throughout this NHL season. I hope for Ben, I wish him nothing but the best, and I'm sure you feel the same as well. But that was a really cool moment to see. So I'd like to offer a stick tap, and I'll pull out the green paddle this time. Just gotta quickly dart out a frame over here. Just give him one of these, stick tap to you, sir. Really cool to see the Edmonton Oilers put on for Ben Stelter like that.
Yeah, I'll double that one. Glioblastoma claimed my mom's life, claimed Gord Downey's life, many others. Just an awful disease to go through. But on a happier news, I'll stick tap my dad. I already told you it's his birthday, but if you're ever going to do it, you do it on his birthday. My dad, Ian Johnston, immigrated to Canada in 1969. He was 20 years old. Obviously changed the fortunes of our family forever then. Didn't know a hockey puck from a football. Or at least at that time, a football I would have thought was a soccer ball. But got interested in the game. He actually played some men's league hockey, even though he didn't get to Canada until his 20s. Passed it on to me, and obviously it changed the course of my life too, because it's given me so much. So thanks for giving me the love of hockey, Dad. Thanks for being a great dad, and hope you have a great day and many more birthdays that we can celebrate together.
Happy birthday, Cobra Papa, and thank you for your support for the Chris Johnston Show, and obviously for your support for your son, Chris Johnston. It is very much appreciated. Just like for everyone watching the show or listening to the show, wherever you are, we appreciate your support of the CJ Show. We will be back on Monday with a brand new episode. Get your questions in now for Ask CJ, whether on Discord or through Twitter. On Twitter, just as long as you use the hashtag AskCJ. And of course, subscribe to all the other great shows on the SDPN network. Subscribe to the SDPN YouTube page. And if you haven't already done so, sdpn.ca/careers is where you can find the postings for the Game Over shows. The show is expanding beyond Andrew Berkshire in Montreal to so many other markets across Canada, and they want you to be the next host of those shows. So get to applying, get those demos ready, and you could be the next host of Game Over, maybe in Calgary or Winnipeg or wherever the postings are at. For CJ, I'm Julian saying so long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.